The archer woman began to fall, but quickly leapt between rocky outcrops to slow her descent and eventually landed safely. Meanwhile, Lin had already set a different plan in motion. He sent a brutal goblin servant to destroy the watchtower. Seeing that the archer had evaded the attack entirely, Lin realized he would need to wait for her to drop her guard before striking. To pass the time, he began running around and acting foolishly, which only served to frustrate her further. She believed Lin was afraid of her, mistaking his antics for cowardice. Confident, she taunted the goblin, claiming he could never escape her sharp gaze. Preparing another attack, she drew her bow once more, charging it with radiant energy. A golden light surrounded the weapon as holy energy gathered at the arrow's tip. From Lin's side, another beast goblin appeared to assist him. But then, something strange happened. The archer suddenly froze. Her legs stopped responding, her strength fading as if her energy had been drained. Confused and alarmed, she struggled to understand what was happening. Her body was giving out at the worst possible moment. She tried to fight it, to stay conscious, but her eyelids grew heavy. A strange force had disrupted her ability to stay awake. She collapsed to the ground and slipped into unconsciousness. As she lay motionless, the Beast Goblin King began to approach with a menacing aura. It looked as though he intended to harm her, but his true intent was far worse. He wanted to devour her. Just as he prepared to strike, Lin intervened, commanding the goblin to stop. "She's mine," Lin declared. The Goblin King obeyed and stepped aside, retreating as Lin approached the unconscious woman with a sinister grin. He was impressed by her spirit. Wasting her potential would be a mistake. Lin lifted her body and carried her away, ordering the goblin to stand guard. Sometime later, the woman stared and slowly opened her eyes. To her surprise, nothing had been done to her while she was unconscious. Lin had waited for her to awaken. He wanted her to see what was coming. As she regained awareness, she noticed the goblin's intimidating presence, but her body remained paralyzed. She cursed them, realizing something had been done to disable her completely. But there was no one to hear her rage. Lin knelt beside her, speaking ominously. "You're about to learn what real domination feels like." His words sent a wave of panic through her as she let out a scream louder than ever before. Meanwhile, in another part of the battlefield, the Sword Saint continued her duel with the Ghost Bull leader. After a long and grueling fight, she finally claimed victory. Exhausted and breathless, she turned to regroup, only to find no one in sight. Then, she heard the distant scream of the archer woman and instantly knew something was terribly wrong. The archer woman was in a dire state, her clothes torn, her body trembling, and a blade pressed to her stomach. From afar, the Sword Saint spotted her, but she knew she wouldn't make it in time. The archer was already crying, fully aware of her grim fate. Despite knowing it was hopeless, the Sword Saint still rushed forward, determined to stop what was about to happen. But before she could reach her, the archer woman took matters into her own hands, driving the blade into her own body and collapsing to the ground. The scene sent a chill down the Sword Saint's spine. She screamed her comrade's name, finally arriving a few agonizing moments later. She dropped to her knees and cradled her friend, her voice breaking as she begged her not to leave her behind on the battlefield. Through weak breaths, the archer shared devastating news. Marshall and Austin had already fallen at the hands of the monstrous goblin and the ghost bull. She said there was no turning back now, and that she had chosen death over the thought of bringing a goblin's child into the human world. Now, everything depended on the Sword Saint. With those final words, the archer's hand slipped from her friend's grasp, and she passed away. Surrounded now by a swarm of ghost bulls, the Sword Saint realized the creatures had sensed their leader's death. Hungry for power, they declared that whoever devoured the human warrior would inherit the might of their fallen boss. The horde roared with bloodlust, but grief had pushed the Sword Saint past her limits. Her fury erupted as she drew her blade, her body suddenly radiating an intense, golden aura tinged with crimson rage. Her eyes burned red as she warned the monsters that they had made a grave mistake. This was the worst possible moment to challenge her. In a shocking move, she plunged her own blade into her chest. A painful groan escaped her lips, but it wasn't the end. Instead, A massive surge of power exploded from within her. Crimson light poured from her eyes. The ghost creatures froze, unsure of what they were witnessing. Then, a radiant golden sphere enveloped her. She began to rise into the air, wings of light unfolding from her back. A powerful barrier protected her as she floated, glowing like a divine being. Soldiers on the battlefield, including the cowardly city count, stood stunned. The Sword Saint, hovering above, ordered all allied forces to retreat immediately. "Get out of here, now," she shouted. "If you stay, you won't survive what's coming." Terrified but obedient, the soldiers ran. Those who remained could barely process what they were seeing. The Sword Saint no longer looked like a human warrior. She was something far more powerful, far more terrifying. Back in the city, the ground trembled. An earthquake shook the land, and even Lin felt it. He turned and stayed in disbelief. Above him, he saw the golden orb. Within it, the transformed Sword Saint. Her tattered clothes fluttered around her radiant form. Wings extended from her back, and golden energy pulsed around her like sunlight given life. In that moment, she looked less like a warrior, and more like an avenging angel from the heavens. The boy knew things were going south fast when his feet began glowing with the same golden aura. Lin realized that the Sword Saint had set her sights on him and his army. Meanwhile, the ghost bulls scattered in panic, trying to escape the radiating light. They knew it spelled their doom. Some tried to flee, while others arrogantly assumed it was just a bluff and they still had a chance to overpower her. But it was already too late. The Sword Saint conjured a blade of pure light in her hand and, with unwavering resolve, struck the ground with a powerful slash. Her face showed no mercy. The impact split the earth itself, revealing molten lava beneath the surface. The ghost bulls were caught directly in the fracture, some of them split in half by the rupture. Stunned and helpless, they began to perish, unable to process what had happened in the blink of an eye. Before anyone could react, the Sword Saint descended back to the ground, returning to her original form. All around her lay the lifeless remains of the ghost bulls, while she still radiated golden energy. A system notification appeared before her. Combat power, 5,000. The scene shifted back to the human settlement, now quiet. Citizens were gathering to clear the rubble left behind by the chaos. Lin, meanwhile, was completely unharmed, silently thanking his instincts for helping him escape just in time. Watching the aftermath, Lin had a realization. Though he had always believed the Sword Saint was a warrior, she was actually a mage, specifically one who wielded holy magic to amplify her combat power. Only a wizard-class fighter could achieve such feats. Still, he questioned whether it was truly worth it, given the harsh side effects. Elsewhere, the Count praised the Sword Saint, declaring her worthy of the title. "You truly are the invincible holy sword guarding this kingdom," he said. The other soldiers echoed his sentiments, chanting her name in admiration. But the Sword Saint herself didn't feel triumphant. Her power had plummeted, from 5,000 to just 2,500, and it was still dropping due to the magical backlash. Lin, watching from the shadows, let out a devilish laugh. The fight wasn't over, and she knew it. She hadn't seen Lin's body among the fallen. He was still out there. She quickly uncorked a potion to restore her strength, but before she could drink it, Lin struck. A sudden holy whirlwind shattered her armor and hit the exact spot that had been weakened by her earlier power surge. The potion fell and shattered on the ground. The Count and the soldiers were stunned, unsure of what had just happened. Then, they looked up toward the watchtower. There stood Lin, poised with a magical crossbow in hand. The truth dawned on them. The despicable goblin had ambushed her while she was at her weakest. The Sword Saint struggled to her feet. The Count rushed to her side, urging her to tend to her wounds and leave the rest to him. Though the odds were grim, he stepped forward to challenge Lin himself. We all know how this is likely to end, but the man's courage was undeniable. Lin, calm and composed, smirked. "Are you seriously thinking you can take me on?" he said, fully aware that the Count was no match for him. The Count gathered what little strength he had left, channeling it into a final charge toward Lin. He shouted insults, calling the goblin despicable and shameless as he sprinted forward. But Lin, unfazed, calmly raised his crossbow and unleashed a fire shot that struck the countdown in a single hit. The blast knocked him unconscious instantly. A satisfied smile crept across Lin's face as he laughed and mocked the fallen man. "Why would you try to reason with a goblin?" he asked. "I was never human to begin with." To Lin, it was laughable that anyone still believed goblins could be reasoned with. Meanwhile, the remaining soldiers, driven by loyalty and pride, stepped forward, thinking they could avenge the Count and become heroes. But honestly, how naive could they be? Lin smirked at the sight of his next targets, pulled a small blade from beneath his cloak, and leapt into motion, slashing through the soldiers with swift, merciless precision. Despite the massacre, their commanding officer tried to rally them. "Don't back down. Fight until the Sword Saint rises again," he shouted. But just as he cried for his men to offer their hearts for the cause, Lin took his words quite literally. In a flash, the goblin lunged forward, drove his hand into the officer's chest, and ripped his heart out. "Since you are offering it anyway," Lin said with a devilish grin. The officer's eyes widened in horror as Lin added, "You're free now. The goblin will gladly accept your sacrifice." Then he finished him off with a whirlwind strike, piercing straight through his chest. The Sword Saint, watching in disbelief, was enraged. She couldn't believe Lin had taken the soldier's words so literally. Her fury exploded. She charged in with wild strikes, her blade swinging furiously in every direction like an enraged cat. But Lin remained just out of reach, taunting her relentlessly. "You move like a grandma," he laughed, dodging her strikes with ease. Though she tried not to let it get to her, the taunts worked. Her concentration wavered. Then, she tried a surprise move, a powerful upward kick aimed straight at Lin's face, paired with a quick blade draw. But Lin reacted just in time, shielding his head. Even so, the force of the kick sent him skidding several meters backward. He took a moment to steady his breath, trying to heal and assess the situation. Despite the Sword Saint's diminished power, down by nearly 2,500 points, she was still an incredibly dangerous opponent. Determined, Lin activated his transcendent arcane art. A swirling blue aura enveloped him as he opened his mouth and let out a deafening roar. The sound wave was overwhelming. Soldiers dropped to the ground, clutching their ears, overcome by excruciating pain before slipping into unconsciousness. Even the Sword Saint staggered, caught in a trance as the roar echoed around her. But she wasn't defeated yet. Sensing danger, she snapped back into awareness and launched herself out of Lin's range. She drew her holy blade and unleashed a flurry of golden slashes in his direction. But Lin was too quick. He dodged every strike with fluid agility. Still, he knew something important. Dark or monstrous powers had little effect on her. And if this battle dragged on, it would take a toll on both of them. Lin realized that unless he found a way to overpower her holy energy, or escape, he might be forced to risk everything. Because no matter how skilled he was, the Sword Saint's divine magic could suppress even the strongest of evil beings, especially if they hesitated, even for a second. The Sword Saint was furious, shouting at Lin that the time had finally come to settle the score and avenge her fallen comrades. But Lin only smiled, his expression smug. "Are you a masochist or something?" he mocked. "You seem to enjoy tasting failure again and again." The vulgar comment made her even angrier. She launched herself into the air and yelled, "Shut up, you filthy goblin." Her holy blade gleamed as she unleashed another powerful slash. The ground below shattered into rubble. But Lin had already dodged, his movements effortless and precise. Her frustration grew. No matter how many times she attacked, Lin evaded every strike with ease. Determined to gain the upper hand, she called out to the approaching reinforcements, telling them to join her in a surprise attack and take the goblin down together. But before the soldiers could reach him, Lin grabbed one by the neck and hurled him straight at the Sword Saint. She froze for a split second. If she protected the soldier, she'd be vulnerable. If she didn't, he'd be seriously injured. In the end, she dodged, letting the soldier take the hit. And just like that, the rest of the reinforcements were overwhelmed. Lin unleashed a burst of power, sending them flying before sprinting out of town. The Sword Saint stayed behind to help the wounded. She screamed after him, demanding he stop running and face her honorably. But Lin had no intention of fighting Fei. He darted through the battlefield, slashing at any soldier in his way. He knew that in terms of speed, he far outclassed her, and that gave him an advantage he fully intended to exploit. "You cowardly scoundrel!" she shouted, furious. "How dare you run after destroying innocent lives in our town?" But Lin wasn't running. He was waiting for her power to drain and her faith to waver. Once her spirit cracked, he would strike with blood of ruin, transforming himself and ending the battle once and for all. An hour passed. The scene shifted. The Sword Saint now stood in the ruins of what was once a proud human town. Her heart sank as she heard the screams of captured soldiers, tortured and broken, begging her to end their suffering. "Please, just finish us," they cried. "Don't let us suffer like this. Avenge us." She stood frozen. She didn't even know how to respond, how to fight back. Lin taunted her from a distance. "Must be exhausting, protecting so many humans. I figured I'd do you a favor and thin the crowd." His voice dripped with venom. "This ends with your defeat, one way or another." But now, something inside the Sword Saint snapped. "You're not going to escape," she said coldly. Her rage had overtaken her logic. Lin could see it. She was breaking. This was his moment. He hurled another injured soldier at her and bolted. Acting on instinct, she slashed the soldier aside to get to Lin. And that was it. The crack had turned into a collapse. Lin grinned with wicked delight. His plan had worked. The Sword Saint, once unwavering in her duty to protect humanity, was now consumed by rage. Blinded by her thirst for vengeance, she began swinging her blade wildly, cutting down even the very people she swore to protect. Her sacred code had shattered, and chaos, as Lin predicted, would soon consume everything around her. Meanwhile, Lin effortlessly dodged every strike, fully aware that the Sword Saint, blinded by rage, couldn't land a hit on him in her current state. He watched with a smug grin, quietly impressed. "She's better at cutting down humans than monsters," he mused. But after a few frenzied moments, the fury in her eyes began to fade. And then, horror set in. She froze, dropped her sword, and looked down at her trembling hands. The weight of what she had done hit her. She hadn't just lost control. She had taken the lives of the very soldiers she swore to protect. Her expression collapsed into despair as her knees buckled. The Sword Saint was shattered, mentally and physically. Lin saw his opportunity. He smeared his blade with his own blood, then hurled it toward her. It pierced her chest cleanly, knocking her backward. Her body fell hard to the ground. Her golden aura flickered and faded, drifting into the sky like vanishing light. Powerless to move, she stayed up in disbelief. In that moment, she realized something unthinkable. The divine being who had once blessed her had turned away. Her voice trembled silently as if trying to say, "I didn't mean to. I tried to protect them." But she knew it was too late. Her body failed her. Her faith was broken. And the legendary Sword Saint, once revered by all, lay unconscious in the pouring rain, abandoned by the very power that once guided her. Lin stood nearby, smiling darkly. The ruin of blood had finally corrupted her. Her divine power erased. Her unshakable faith shattered. Even someone as powerful as her had a fatal weakness, faith. And when it breaks, so does everything else. But Lin had more than victory on his mind. In his twisted thoughts, he imagined forcing her into servitude, corrupting the fallen saint and making her a weapon for the Goblin cause. With her power under his control, he dreamed of toppling those who ruled through blind devotion and tyranny. The rain intensified. Thunder cracked in the distance, yet Lin remained unmoved. He sat near her unconscious body, preparing to take the next terrible step. Suddenly, a warning cry shattered the moment. The brutal goblin came charging through the storm, panicked and yelling, "They are coming! The holy temple! They are here!" Lin's eyes widened. The temple? Before he could react, the clatter of armor echoed behind him. He turned and saw them. Dozens of warriors in full plate, moving in perfect formation. At their lead was a formidable figure, glowing with divine energy and wielding a radiant sword. With grim resolve, the armored leader raised his blade and unleashed a holy technique, Bishop's Cross. Recognizing the threat instantly, Lin leapt away from the sword saint's body. He had been moments away from committing something unforgivable, but now the divine knights had intervened just in time. The bishop stepped forward, eyes locked on the fallen woman. Rage and sorrow burned in his gaze. "She doesn't deserve this fate," he said coldly. "Not by the hands of filth like you." Surrounded by holy warriors, the sword saint now had defenders once more, and Lin had no choice but to retreat. According to the bishop, Lin might have looked like a small, unassuming goblin, but beneath that fragile appearance lurked a terrifying, incomprehensible power. To him, Lin embodied the very definition of a devil disguised in plain sight. Still, Lin remained unfazed by the bishop's condemnation. After all, even when he had been human, no one had treated him with dignity. The bishop then gave a solemn command. He ordered all temple sentinels to channel their divine energy, unite in strength, in the name of peace, and bring an end to the wretched goblin once and for all. The moment the order was issued, the holy soldiers began to radiate with sacred energy. They formed a perimeter around Lin, preparing to trap and eliminate him permanently. Sensing the immense threat, Lin braced himself. The sentinels charged at him with blinding speed, showing no intention of stopping. A flurry of holy swords came down on him. Lin barely managed to defend himself, relying on the dark power granted to him by Ifra. He was stunned by the sheer speed of the holy soldiers. Even clad in heavy armor, they moved like lightning. What shocked him even more was their collective combat strength. Each sentinel carried a power level of 3,000, surpassing even the sword saint. Lin struggled to keep up. He narrowly dodged every strike, knowing these warriors were unlike anything he'd faced before. But surrender wasn't in his nature. In desperation, he slit his palm and hurled his transfiguration blood into the face of one of the soldiers. The effect was immediate. The sentinel's eyes burned, and he collapsed, screaming in pain. The bishop witnessed the scene unfold and quickly ordered the rest of the sentinels to cease pursuit. "Do not engage him further," he warned. "This creature is beyond even our strength." Recognizing his chance, Lin retreated, leaping out of the town and disappearing into the distance. The soldiers could only watch, shaken by the reality. This wasn't just a goblin. It was a demon in disguise. As Lin fled, he pondered the might of the holy temple. If even the lower-tier sentinels possessed such overwhelming power, he needed to rethink everything. His current strength and his goblin army wouldn't be enough. A full-scale overhaul was necessary if he wanted to challenge humanity again. Meanwhile, back in the town, the bishop approached the fallen sword saint. Her body was weak, her soul damaged. She needed urgent healing and spiritual cleansing before the darkness inside her could fully take hold. Without it, she risked being lost forever. One of the sentinels spoke up, concerned. "Are we not going to address the goblin threat and the disappearance of the divine attendant?" The bishop gently covered the sword saint with his cloak and lifted her. "It's already too late for that," he said solemnly. "As for the divine attendant, Ifra has been replaced. A new one has already been chosen. There's no reason to keep searching." The scene then transitions to a dense jungle, far from the human settlement but close to an old cemetery. There, Lin crouched near the corpses of the ghost species bulls. Though buried in haste, the humans had done a poor job, and the bodies remained intact. Smirking, Lin realized this meant only one thing. His goblin kin would feast, absorb the remaining demonic energy, and grow stronger. And soon, the world would see what they had truly become. Congratulations! You have reached level 80. The view shifted to the goblin's mountain den, where his most loyal lieutenants were waiting. Some warriors, some mystics. Gabu eagerly greeted him, pressing for details about the battle. The elven mother and daughter among his ranks quickly sensed that Lin had grown more powerful and more energized. Lin confirmed their suspicions with a smirk, saying that everything was still proceeding according to plan. He had one clear goal: to bring the Sword Saint fully under his control and use her fall as a symbol to shake the foundations of the human world. But he admitted that the fight had taken a twist. Just when victory was within reach, the Holy Sentinels had arrived and taken her away. The Goblin Slayer woman among them could hardly believe it. Lin had actually managed to defeat the Sword Saint. But despite the interruption, he made it clear this wasn't over. The next encounter would be even more decisive. Upon hearing Lin's announcement, the Goblin Slayer woman, once eager for attention, paused as he raised his hand for silence. He explained that while their victory against the humans had bought them time and momentum, they now needed to act wisely. "We must relocate," he said firmly. "Staying here means living in fear of human retaliation. But there's a place, untouchable, sacred even, where no holy soldier would dare to tread carelessly." The others leaned in, curious. "It's the Grand Tomb," Lin said with a wicked grin. "The same place the ox-demon species originated from." The scene shifted to another goblin outpost, one where survivors from the flooded water den had gathered. Word had spread quickly, and now hundreds of goblins were preparing to follow Lin on the journey to the Grand Tomb. Watching over the swelling ranks, Lin silently calculated the future. He recalled that the Grand Tomb had a long-standing pact with the Holy Temple. As long as no boundaries were crossed, neither side would interfere with the other. That truce meant safety and the perfect conditions to forge a mighty goblin empire. "All we need now," Lin muttered to himself, "is to expand our population quickly." He outlined his plan to his lieutenants. Along the path to the Grand Tomb, there were 19 villages and 2 towns scattered across roughly 700 kilometers. If they moved quickly and efficiently, they could gather a strong civilian base to grow their numbers, not by slaughter, but by subjugation. "Avoid killing," he instructed, "but if there's resistance, handle it as needed." With that, the goblin horde marched, burning with determination. Over the next few days, they passed through 10 villages, but progress was slower than expected. Despite their numbers, they had only secured 230 captives, far fewer than Lin's goal. Frustrated, he urged the scouts to locate a larger settlement ahead. Soon, a small but seemingly prosperous town appeared on the horizon. Lin gave the order, raid the town swiftly and move on. The goblins prepared to strike. The scene shifted to the town itself, where local guards and adventurers gathered near the mayor's hall. Rumors had reached them, a goblin band on the move, but no one seemed especially concerned. "Just goblins," one of the adventurers scoffed. "I've slain so many I could build a fortress from their bones." Others laughed in agreement, confident that the threat was minor. "We'll wait at the gate," one soldier said. "As soon as they show up, we wipe them out." But among the scouts returning from reconnaissance, a few looked pale with fear. One tried to warn the others, "These aren't ordinary goblins. They are organized and massive. Their leader is something else entirely." Still, the warnings fell on deaf ears. "Relax," said a smug young adventurer with a confident grin. "Even if they're tougher than average, I can handle them. Nothing I haven't done before." He was known as Ace, a level 50 adventurer with power, but also an ego to match. So high on his victories, he no longer recognized real danger. Then, the mayor stepped outside. His eyes scanned the horizon, and something shifted in his expression. "They're close," he said grimly. "Get into position. This won't be just another skirmish." The town held its breath as the first signs of the goblin horde emerged from the trees, silent, focused, and unlike anything the villagers had ever seen. The soldiers stationed at the watchtower scanned the field and raised the alarm. The goblins had already breached the town's outer edge. At the front lines, Ace stood confidently before the rest of the garrison, grinning as he proposed a little contest. Whoever slew the most goblins would win, and the loser would buy drinks for a month. What Ace didn't realize was that he'd have to survive to claim that drink. Despite the danger, the others humored him. Some warned him to let it go, knowing full well that Ace was the strongest among them. No one in town came close to matching his level. Still, Ace was getting fired up, expecting a dull, easy fight. "Just goblins," he muttered. "Quick job, a few coins, and more favor from the mayor." He waved the others off, suggesting they relax while he handled the threat himself. But when he turned back toward the field, he noticed something strange. The soldiers behind him were visibly trembling. He glanced back once more, and that's when he saw it. A massive goblin horde surged forward, and above them, winged beasts flew through the smoky sky, too distant to identify. As the dust thickened and the tension rose, Lin descended from the sky, leading his forces. From the fog and ash, goblins burst forward at terrifying speed. Then, it happened. Ace, frozen in shock, dropped to his knees. His eyes widened in disbelief as a dragon-like creature emerged from the skies, backing the goblins. He stammered, overwhelmed by the realization that dragons, beasts he once believed to be myths, were aiding the enemy. Panic spread like wildfire. Soldiers abandoned their positions and ran for their lives, shouting that no one had warned them of monsters supporting the goblins. It was chaos. Ace tried to recover, calling after his fleeing comrades, but his legs wouldn't respond. Meanwhile, Lin watched from above, irritated. He had expected more of a challenge. He had assumed the humans were prepared. But the town was crumbling before a single coordinated strike. "Begin," Lin commanded. The goblins rushed in, breaking through homes and inns where soldiers cowered in fear. The attack was swift and brutal. Screams echoed through the town as the goblins overwhelmed everything in their path. Ace's companions shouted at him, furious. "You said you'd take care of them. And now look at you, frozen, useless." Ace couldn't understand it. The goblins he'd fought before had been small, weak, and mindless. These were something else entirely. These weren't goblins, were they? Then, one of the mutated goblins emerged from the shadows in front of him, towering, grotesque, and radiating killing intent. Ace screamed, collapsing in fear before the creature could even lift a finger. Lin landed nearby, surveying the chaos with a smirk. "Well," he said sarcastically, looking at the unconscious adventurer, "this was supposed to be fun. But it looks like the whole town fell in record time. Barely broke a sweat."